Hey, good morning. How's everybody doing? Okay, today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the experiences of our childhood that don't don't really pertain to anybody else, but fun for us to go through since the family is who's watching this. Um, when we had my um, mother's father's sister was my great aunt, and her and her husband could not have children, so she sort of adopted us kids and my uncle's kids as hers, and she was very special to us. And one of the things that we used to do when we were little was go spend time at my aunt and uncle's house. And they owned like an older ranch house. I might have already talked a little bit about it. An older ranch house that had a really cool breezeway between the garage and the back door. And in the breezeway was a swing that we used to love to sit on and swing. It squeaked, like you could hear the springs. I think I talked about this. Anyway, so we used to go visit there, and they owned, I think it was around 20 acres, and they were in grapes, and they used to um, dry the grapes into raisins and sell them to whatever the raisin place is called, Sun something. Anyway, so we would go when we would go there and stay with them for a while. Maybe a few days, a week. I don't remember. We would help them out on the ranch. Help them. We were kids. What did we do? But we helped a little. But we would go and so some of the things that you had to do there was they had paper trays, what they called paper trays, and they were just square pieces of butcher paper type paper, and the workers would go along and lay these paper trays out on the ground, and then cut the grapes and throw them onto the paper tray, all in one where they weren't stacking, they were all flat, so that they could lay out in the sun and dry. So they used to get workers, and I'm not exactly sure how all the thing worked with the workers, because I was little and I didn't pay attention, but they were Mexican people who came over the border from Mexico, and they were called day workers. And there was a guy that had a truck that would come by all the ranches and see who needed workers, and then I think I talked about this, but I guess my uncle paid the driver, and then he would get a couple of workers, and they didn't speak English or anything, so we never could communicate with them, but they would work, and they would do all these labors, like put the grapes on the paper trays. So after the grapes were all dry, then the workers would come back and roll up the paper trays. So they'd put the paper over and then roll them up, so you'd have these rolls of raisins that still had the stems and everything on them, of course, and then rows of raisins like this. And so one of our jobs when we were there was they would hook a flatbed up to the back of the tractor. And my sister and I mostly, because my brother got to drive the tractor. He was the boy, so he got to drive the tractor most of the time. I don't think he might have picked up trays. He'll let me know, I'm sure, in the comments if he was actually out there picking up trays. I remember him driving the tractor because I was always jealous. But we would walk along beside the trailer, and our job was to pick up these rolls and lay them on the trailer and stack them all nicely. And I think somebody rode on the trailer and stacked them too. So, you'd take these rolls without letting them fall apart and put them up on the trailer. And so, hang on just a second. Okay, so anyway, it was a really, really, really dirty job because tractor, of course, was making dust, and the ground in between the the grape vines was very fine dirt, and it always was very dusty. So by the time we got finished with that job, your nostrils would be full of dirt, and you never appreciated a bath more. I mean, as a kid, you always rebelled against taking baths. Not when you worked at my aunt and uncle's. You were looking forward to that bath. It felt so good when you were done. That was one of the jobs we did. And then another one was after we picked up all the rolls of raisins, they'd take them over to a sorting table and dump them out on a sorting table. And so our job, along with the workers would be there helping with this also. But you'd go through the grapes or the raisins and find spoiled ones that looked mildewy or spoiled or whatever, and pull those out. So you were kind of cleaning them out, and then they would roll along this roller thing and dump into a box that I'm sure you've seen the wooden boxes they used to use, or maybe still do, that the raisins would then go into. And at the plant, I guess, all the stems and everything were removed, because we didn't do that part. It was all still had the stems and spider webs and things like that. But we used to eat the raisins right off the tray, and you just pick up a handful of them and kind of blow off any dust and eat them. They were way better there, even dirty, than they were once they got in the box, but most people wouldn't know that. But that was really fun. But anyway, this one time when we were there, and I think we were supposed to be there for about a week, and I don't remember my sister being with us, so I don't know if she was with us that time. But my aunt and uncle's house had a cellar, and she used to keep her canned goods, she used to can stuff, and she'd keep them down in there because, it keeps a steady temperature. And it was a very scary place because it had spiders and stuff. But we used to like to go down in there anyway, because we would pretend like it was a fort, and she would let us do that. She'd open it up sometimes and let us do that. And it was several steps down into it, and then it always smelled real musty, like wet dirt, and but it's a good smell, but it had this real dank smell to it, and you could see under the house. It was kind of spooky, but we were playing in there, and we were playing fort, and we asked my aunt if we could play in the water, turn the hose on and get water, because we were pretending like we were cooking stuff and everything, and she said no. She didn't want us doing that we could, play without that. And so I guess it had rained. Either it had rained or my aunt had hosed down all the dirt, because she used to do that to keep the dust down. She would go out there and sprinkle all the dirt driveway, and every place there was dirt that was near the house or that people were going to drive. She would spray it down with water, because that helped cut the dust. Such a smart thing to do. And there was a puddle out in the yard near where we were playing. It was a pretty good sized puddle, and so we just used the water from the puddle, since she wasn't going to let us use the hose water to do our little whatever we were doing. And when she came out and found us playing in the water, she just got really mad, because she had told us we weren't to use the water. Well, we knew better, but our defense was, but you didn't say not the puddle. The puddle was just there. Anyway, she called my mom, and my mom had to come and pick us up. My aunt she was a great lady. She was a lot of fun, but she was very stern. And I know I told you about me throwing the wrapper out of the window of the car, and she stopped and backed up and made me pick it up. That's how she was. You followed directions or you went home. It was simple as that. And she didn't just threaten, she did. And so my mom had to come and pick us up, and we had to go home. I don't remember ever really getting in trouble, but I felt terrible enough because we had disappointed my aunt so bad. So that was one of those learning experiences you have as a kid at my aunt's raisin ranch. We loved to go there, though. It was such a cool place. I just remember all the little glass shoes she had as decorations in her house. I always was in love with the glass shoes, and later on in life I started a glass shoe collection that my sister fulfilled immensely. She always was giving me glass shoes as gifts, so I had this really huge collection that finally I didn't have room for it when we moved here, so I had to get rid of some of them, but that was just one of those memories. And she had doilies. She had doilies over all of her furniture. All these little glass shoes would sit on doilies, and doilies on the back of the chairs and on the arms of the chairs and stuff. I think she tatted them all. I believe she did. I have some tatting around here somewhere that she did, or I might have given it to Shauna, but she tatted a lot. So, and that, if you don't know what that is, you'll have to look it up because I'm not going to explain it. Something that does reflect the difference between the past and now is a silly little thing that I wanted to tell you about. But when we were real young, they didn't have plastic wrap for, it didn't exist. So when we had sandwiches, my mother would wrap them in wax paper. So you'd just fold wax paper over them. It kept your sandwiches pretty fresh. It worked pretty good. But when we got the first plastic wrap, it was called cling. It might have been called cling wrap. It was saran wrap, I'm pretty sure. But I want to tell you something. That stuff, it was really, really hard to work with, and I'm sure that's why they changed it. If you could manage to get it, though, on a bowl, it stuck. It stuck to the bowl. I mean, there was nothing coming loose. Things were almost leak-proof because it stuck so good to the bowls. I haven't found any like that in years since, but back when we first got it, it was very frustrating because you'd pull it off. If you weren't real careful about pulling it off of the roll, it would all stick together, and then you couldn't pull it apart. I mean, it would just be throw that one away and try again. So I know people were just frustrated with it, and that's why it went away. But just a little difference between then and now. My dad used to try to educate us, about the world, things in the world, and one of the things that he showed us was these edible plants, and I don't know what they are, but they grew kind of flat to the ground, sort of like a sticker plant, and they had these little round wheel-looking little things that would have been their flower at one time, I guess, but anyway, it grew into this little thing. They were only about 1/4 of an inch, or maybe a little, not quite a half an inch around, and you could take the outer petal thing off of them, and they were edible, and we used to eat those all the time. I don't know what they were, but I liked it. He had to be careful teaching us that because we didn't know what was edible and what wasn't. We had a plant that grew in our yard that had these little round red berry looking things, and or they almost looked like teeny tiny tomatoes, but he said don't touch those are poisonous. So I don't know how he knew all that, but that was something he taught us. Another thing he taught us that I think some kids know today, but most kids probably don't, was we'd go out and on the lawn, if you could find a piece of lawn that was long enough, get a strip like this and kind of thicker, and you put them you put it like this between your thumbs, and then you could blow on it and it would whistle. And so he taught us how to do that with a blade of grass. Another thing that we did, him and my mom, maybe my mom mostly taught us, but I don't remember. But you can get an empty spool. We used to be, back when they were wooden, I don't know if you could do this now. Spools for thread were made out of wood. And So you could get an empty uh, wooden spool, and then you get all the soap that's left over when it gets too small to actually use, and you leave it in there because it's wasteful to throw it away, but it's kind of thin like this. Well, we would cut a circle out of that soap and put a hole in the middle, and then you'd get a wooden match and strike it and then blow it out, and then you'd get a rubber band and you'd run the rubber. How did this work? I guess you had to have a shorter match on one end that you'd put through the rubber band. Then you'd run the rubber band through the spool, and then you'd run it through the circle of the soap, and then you'd put the other rubber band needed to be just the length, a little longer than the spool, but you didn't want it real loose. But and then you'd put the other match that was longer on the other end, so you'd have the spool here, and the one match would have a stick part sticking out. The other one was flush, so it wasn't hanging over. And then you'd use that, and you roll it up. We might have had to put a little bit of moisture, but I don't think so. I think if you put moisture on the soap, it would make it stick. So anyway, you wind that up. Maybe you had the wind up on the other end, can't remember. Wind that up and then set it on the ground, and it would roll because you had this long stick sticking out. And as the rubber band unwound and the soap made it so that it was it was slick, it would roll. Then it makes this little tractor, and we used to make those all the time. It was pretty cool. It was a cool thing to know. We had a tree out back that I believe my dad said it had a lemon trunk, roots from a lemon tree, because I don't know, I don't remember if I remember this right, but I believe that it was some sort of orange tree, and I think it was an orange tree, and they don't do well on their own, and so by grafting them to a lemon root system, they were hardier or something, I don't remember. Anyway, so this tree already had this odyssey about it. But he had read something about grafting, so he got limbs from other types of plants, like plum. They probably had to be somewhat compatible, I'm not sure, but he had, I think it was a kumquat, I don't remember which plants. Anyway, you cut a little notch into the tree, and then you make, your stem that you've got compatible, and he'd put it in there, and he'd hook it in with, I believe it was tar, and then if all went well, it would graft together, it would grow together, so that limb would actually produce the fruit that it came from. So you might have an apricot and a plum and a peach all on the same tree. It was totally cool. So he did that, and we used to have that tree growing in them. Eventually, I think it all reverts to just the one tree, because I don't think it stayed that way over the years, but he was real proud of himself because he had grafted it and it actually took hold, so it worked. We had this huge willow tree in our backyard at one time. I think that's before the grafted tree was put in, because he got rid of it because he hated the mess the willow tree makes. Willow trees shed their leaves, and there was a ton of them. It was hard to take care of, but while we had it, and it was huge, and the limbs grew all the way to the ground. I think I might have told you this, but he cut the limbs on one side so that it made a doorway, and then he went inside and cut the limbs inside and it made this really cool fort, and you could walk in there and hang out, and people couldn't see you in there. It was totally cool. But you could see out, you could see through the limbs, but people couldn't see in. It was totally cool. I was my dad used to do cool stuff. I think because my dad was a tinkerer, he liked to create things. He made lots of cool things. We tended to do the same. So I always wanted one of those little stoves that little girls had, they didn't really work. They didn't do anything, but they had the oven and they had the burners on top, and the burners might light up. I don't know, but anyway, and you pretend like you're cooking on there and stuff, and I never could get one, so I got a box, and because my dad kept everything, my dad was kind of a hoarder. Everything seemed useful to him. It was very good that he was married to my mom, who was definitely not a hoarder, and so she kept everything out of the house. But my dad had a garage full, so you had about everything in there you'd ever want. So I got the lids off of some coffee cans. Back then, I believe you might open the coffee cans with a key, like I explained last time. I can't remember, but they seemed to have a little rim on them after you took them off. I think it was so you could place them back. I don't know how it worked, but anyway, he had these. They weren't plastic lids; they were metal, because they didn't have plastic lids back then. So I got the lids, and those would be my burner tops, and I think I attached them with brads. My mother always had crafty things around, so she had brads. So you'd make a hole in the tin, and then stick the brad through and spread it out on the bottom, and it would hold them in place, and then cut up the front of the box to make the oven door. And we used to create things like that. That's what we did. I mean, you used your imagination and you created things back in the day. It kept your brain going. I know you get good things on the internet. You can learn lots of cool stuff, but I think actually doing it and finding stuff laying around to create these things is so much. I don't know. It just feels good. It just feels good. That's all I can say. I loved it. We made lots of things. I told you before that my dad loved to go fishing, and so I think he created. I mean, I'm assuming. I don't know. Maybe they sell these things. I have no idea. But he had a rod that was just a metal rod with a handle, and it had an electrical cord, and he would plug that electrical cord in, and it would make the rod have electricity in it, and then he could stick that into the ground, like in the garden where the ground was moist, and it would cause the worms to come up out of the ground because they'd try to get away from the electric feeling that they were getting. And then that's how he got his bait. Some of his bait, his worms. that was cool though, because seeing those little worms come up out of the ground, that was pretty cool. At somewhere, my dad got a reel-to-reel tape recorder, which was the only kind at one time that you had. You didn't have little tape recorders like they had. Well, they might even have those anymore. I don't know if you can even get tape recorders anymore. But on the reel-to-reel, it was big, and and it had a microphone, and you could make the speed of the thing go faster or slower or whatever. And he used to let us kids play with this all the time, and so we used to do plays on the recorder. Like, we always watched Gunsmoke when I was a kid, so we would go onto the recorder when we had friends over and stuff, and we would each be a character. And that was when Chester was on Gunsmoke, and he was the guy with the straight leg, the one straight leg, and had that real southern drawl accent. And somebody would be Chester, and we would do the voices of the people and make a little funny skit about Gunsmoke. But one of the things we loved to do was try to make the chipmunks sound. So you'd have to like sing a song really slow, so that when you sped it up, you could still hear the words of it, but you sounded like a chipmunk. So we had more fun with that reel-to-reel recorder. We would just laugh. The things that we created on there. I would love to get a hold of the old tapes. I mean, they're all gone now, and listen to them again, because we might not laugh so much now, but at the time we thought it was hysterically funny. And your voice sounds so much different than you hear yourself when you record yourself that way. It's funny. Um, I wanted to tell you about the underground gardens because they're still there, and you should make a point to go see them. Forestier Underground Gardens. They're on Facebook. They have summer tours, and I don't believe it's expensive, but we went there as a Girl Scout or Brownie troop when I was a kid, and I not been back since, and I don't think I can go now because I don't think it's wheelchair accommodating, but you really should go and experience that. This man built this underground house that was used to be huge. I've read that a portion of it was the land was sold when he died and his family took over. I think at some point they had some financial problems and they had to sell off some acreage, which was a portion of this huge underground facility that he had built. But it has holes in the roof then he'd have a tree growing underground, and the hole in the roof was so it could get sunlight and these trees would actually grow up. Some of those trees are still producing fruit today. If you go to their Facebook page, you'll see some of the awesome old trees that are still growing in these underground. How the rain and stuff he kept that out when he had the roofs open like that, I don't know. I don't remember. I mean, they'll explain it all to you when you go, but really make an attempt to go see the Forestier Underground Gardens. You won't regret it, and if you don't go, you will regret it. So just a point on my part. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was a phenomenon that went on for a very short time when I think I was more a teenager or early momhood, probably more early momhood, so this would have been the 70s, maybe the early 70s, but we went through this phase where there were streakers, and why people do this, I mean, somebody does something and then the whole world decides, oh, that's cool, let's all do that. And so you would have like a football game, and all of a sudden this streaker would go running through, and what a streaker is a person who gets undressed, except usually they'd leave their shoes on because they're going to be running, and they streak through some event and then trying to get away where they won't get captured and caught, but they even have a song about it. They call me the streak. That happened back in the day. So when you have all these funny things that you guys do today from what's on the computer and everybody wants to replicate, one of the things that we had was the streakers. So you could look up this song. It's very cute. It's a funny song. So that's what I had to talk about today. I'm kind of like running out of things. I don't know what else I'll come up with, but we'll see what happens. I do plan on continuing until I run out of words to say. So you guys are in big trouble. So I appreciate you tuning in, and have a good week, and I will see you next time. Love you guys.